Kids are already using it at school. Executives are reading headlines that 95% of pilots flop. PR and legal approaching these tools with caution. And strategy sounds just like a buzzword. Today, we make the mess legible so you can start prompting, practically prompting. Hey there, I'm Alex Kalish, and this is Practically Prompting. Without Practically Speaking, my co-host this week, they met with some technical difficulties. So, Practical Prompting is the podcast that turns generative AI hype into everyday wins. Each episode follows a 2-act play. Act 1 tackles a real-life headache with a single deep dive into how you can use it to help. And Act 2 zooms out to the bigger picture uses at work. This episode of Practically Prompting is we're breaking from our executive series, this week and getting back into it in the future. Practically speaking needs a little bit of work to get situated. Today's Act 1 Spotlight, we're going to be talking about the kitchen table and just how kids are using generative AI right now and how that can be scary. Today's Act 2 Spotlight, we're going to be driving clarity amongst that fear that is permeating the realms of many organizations. So if you're into actionable nerdness served with a side of dad jokes, grab your coffee, open up your favorite chat window, or if you're driving, please keep your eyes on the road, and let's get prompting, practically prompting. So this is episode 11, and going to be talking about why generative AI feels scary. I mean, the kitchen table right now, chances are your teen, they've already tried generative AI. About 70% of kids have used some kind of generative AI, 53% saying they use it for homework help. But that's not just it either. Among young people, so this is 14 to 22 years of age, people are using generative AI for information, just getting information. 53% are just using generative AI to get information. Another 51% are using it for brainstorming. And this isn't just some sort of cheating. This isn't some sort of, it's got to be done under the table. This is well-intentioned just learning through new tools that didn't exist back in the day. And in high school surveys, cheating rates haven't been increasing post-ChatGPT. I mean, this is, again, there's a source I can drop into the description here, but this is from Stanford's EDU Week GSE, their education system. Our kids aren't really waiting for some sort of de-scarying generative AI. They're not waiting for some sort of policy memo. They're already learning how to aim and fire this tool right now. When you start thinking about how kids are leveraging generative AI to this standpoint, you might start getting you might start feeling fear and trepidation about how they're already using it and you haven't necessarily started. And one of the ways to start demystifying that, even just at the kitchen table, is just asking how to use generative AI in a household setting. You don't have to come up with this crazy prompting strategy or be an expert in how to ask questions. Just start asking open-ended questions about how your kids might be using generative AI. Heck, you could just even ask your kids to walk you through how they're leveraging generative AI and learn how easy it is to get started. This doesn't need to be something that's swept under the rug, that's a boogeyman in the closet waiting to jump out at you. It doesn't have to be scary. There doesn't have to be fog here. You can drive clarity through that fog by just getting into your favorite generative AI tool and giving it a try. Now, in Act 2 today, the scary business headline that has recently come out, 95% of generative AI pilots are failing. And this is from an MIT paper that was published earlier, maybe a week or so ago. And this is kind of coalescing some reports showing that pilots are not showing measurable financial impact. I would challenge you to look deeper into this source because that's not my experience in training and walking people through how to practically use generative AI. In fact, piloting some sort of large scale solution actually drives a little bit more fear than just using the off the shelf systems to get a better understanding of what's going on, drive clarity, and move faster in a realm where you can now just ask a single question and get a multi-year roadmap. Now, I'm not discounting the author's findings, but I do challenge you to look deeper into the structure that and the mechanism they use to grade the effectiveness of generative AI pilots. In my experience, it's almost, I would say, 80% are adding value. With the noted exception that there is a lot of teams out there that are building tools and building different ways and building different generative AI solutions, and they're not achieving value for customers, primarily because customers aren't thinking to go to those tools in the first place. And when they do, they're interacting at a basic level and not extracting the value that you would expect from something that's so wide-ranging. And this is, again, getting to that hard standpoint of generative AI is scary. I don't know how to use it. These are all very valid feelings. And when you're developing a strategy for rolling out or using generative AI at work, there's a lot of times where fear is just baked into the equation. And there's a component of inertia amongst peers and the workplace where we've always done it this way. That's how we should continue doing it. This newfangled technology, I don't know if it's going to be super valuable. So it's no wonder that leaders are freezing here. Kids are sprinting ahead, headlines are screaming failure, but at the same time, there's this background dread. And some of the real reasons behind that I've seen are that strategy is ill-defined. Like, should we buy a tool? Should we make a tool? Should we conduct some sort of internal pilot? How do we even go about doing that? And this strategy component is just not very fleshed out. It doesn't need to be super fleshed out to get tremendous value, but teams are still struggling to get over that first hurdle. The additional component is that because generative AI is so wide-ranging, it's infinite. You have to use it to do everything, and when you have everything at your fingertips, you almost have nothing because it's almost, I don't know where to start. Additionally, the risks feel maybe a little bit more invisible to the naked eye. Maybe they're hidden behind a wall of, I can just use this output. And that's not usually the right answer either. Guardrails are super important, and governance is very important when starting to use generative AI. And governance doesn't have to be extensive. You can listen to one of my previous podcasts about this. Governance is a framework for how to interact with the tool. And one of the strategies I want to talk through today in this Act 2 is about how in the business world, you can set up this strategy by having some amount of you almost have generative AI assist before doing anything automated. So what I mean by that is, instead of saying, we're just going to buy the top of the end solution, it's going to agentically do all the things, tie to all the networks, put it all together, cook us food and feed it to us as well. Instead, asking it to give you a bunch of options, and those options you then choose from and move forward. By doing this, you're setting up this mentality of guardrails associated with generative AI. You're not just going to take the output and run with it. You're going to use that output. You're going to be a human in the loop. This is going to be an augmentive force. So to drive clarity in this fog of fear, one of the ways that you can think about strategy is to define it based on the outcome targets. That could be reducing time to first response from an email or something coming in. That could be time utilization overall and the productivity improvements associated with it. Then you set in some guardrails like privacy boundaries, which tools to use, HITL, so human in the loop approvals, where generative AI isn't a copy and paste. It's not a replacement for the human in the loop. There's an audit component. There is a person who is double checking every decision or every output. And this can set up some sort of habit forming where you're still approaching from an outcome-based, results-based initiative, but you're doing so with safety in mind. You can include a couple metrics. It doesn't have to be a tremendous number. You could have 2 or 3 KPIs, key process indicators, things like cycle time and accuracy, and just make sure that they're on point in these early pilot plans where you're starting to try this out in a week rather than months from now. Strategy doesn't need to be what model is this and which tool should we use. It's more around what is the outcome that we're looking for? Under what rules are we going to approach trying to achieve this outcome? And how can we prove it in less than 30 days? The scary stat that MIT put out there with 95% adding no value, I personally believe it has a large portion to do with how the study was run, but also how people are interacting with these tools in the first place. Here's an example of just an enterprise example. Monday Ops Pack. So on Monday morning, wake up, get ready to go into work, and there's just a deck that needs to be built that takes inputs from multiple different systems. The numbers, you got to find them. You got to loop into a one-pager, get a 30-minute brief on the calendar all before 9:30 a.m., where you've got your top 5 deltas versus last week, the 3 escalations, and a couple wins. And this can all be generated by using generative AI, by dumping that information in and asking it to craft you this document. You can get very good answers in very small amounts of time. Like, we're talking in the tune of minutes rather than an hour or 2 hours of coalescing all this information, copying and pasting it, and putting it into different wording structures that the leader wants to see. You can have AI draft this one-pager from the CSV reports and exports, and, they're reports and exports. They're report exports. So those Excel files or those comma-separated value lists, CSV files, get uploaded and an automated draft comes out. And that one-pager is a component of the solution, but the human fixes it. You can also tie in light components where there's some amount of connections between some of these systems, but you also don't need to do that. It can just be straight up uploading information. And why this is helpful is you can always automate later. You can have it auto-publish to Slack or email after a certain number of people agree with the analysis. You can pilot metrics where it's how much prep time did it take to make this, the discrepancies across what would otherwise be manually created, and some sort of usefulness score between 1 to 5. This calms fear by replacing that infinite ask of generative AI can do everything to, summarize what's happening, summarize our business. Let's do it a little bit faster with a tight, auditable Monday ritual. And before long, you're looking back at your Mondays and wondering, how did I do it without generative AI? So, where do you start looking for value first in this strategy? Places where measurement is clean, handoffs are repeatable, something where it's happening recurringly. That could be intakes, documents from the back office, FAQs. This could be customer contacts. It could be some amount of business processes that happen on a weekly basis. Headlines might suggest that you have to do the front of the house, all these big components tied together, but actually structured, repeatable flows are safer to start with, and they're faster to prove and help drive clarity into that fearness fog. So a couple different prompting strategies that you can just copy and paste right now. Draft a one-page GenAI strategy brief for insert whatever process. Include outcome targets, at least 3, baselines and how it's measured, constraints, guardrails, so that's privacy, approvals, audit, rollback triggers. You can ask it for 3 portfolios to assist. This is all one prompt, by the way. I'm kind of adding a couple words in here to describe it. 3 portfolios where you assist, hybrid, or automate later with setup effort, the cycle time impact, error risk, required data, and SOP changes, as well as human in the loop steps. The 30-day pilot metrics with cycle time accuracy, rework percentage, and the amount that's automated versus assisted. And then finally, a decision rubric for choosing one option this month. And this is just asking generative AI to help you make your generative AI strategy brief. And you go back and forth. You're going to get an output here that is so much better than spending time staring at a blank page. Use it as an 80% starting point. Drive clarity into that fear. Another option is to use generative AI to help analyze risks beyond just the legal and PR risk, but including those. Could be something along the lines of build a risk register for whatever process across operational, workforce, customer, data privacy, fairness, community, security, legal, and PR. For each, rank the likelihood, impact, mitigation, and which guardrail from the brief addresses it, and output into a 1-table summary and a 3-bullet executive narrative. And now you've got risks that are tangible right in front of you, and you can grade whether or not you need to use the guardrails or let your team kind of experience without guardrails and recognize how much more important those guardrails are when they step outside that comfort zone. I hope generative AI after this feels a little bit less scary. It makes the work a little bit smaller, the rules clear. Kids are already practicing this. They're already using generative AI. Headlines might be shouting one thing, but it's our job to qualify the outcome, set those rules, and pick an option to make a difference within 30 days. Until next time, you've been practically prompting. Have a great rest of your day.